There are encounters in life that are anything but coincidental. A single mother, an 8-year-old boy lying in the emergency room, and the man who walked away when she was pregnant, now standing in the same hospital beside his new wife. Just one glance across that cold white hallway shatters 8 years of silence, and long-buried secrets begin to surface. This isn't just a love story, it's a journey of forgiveness, of second chances, and of learning how to love again, the very person who once broke your heart. If you believe some relationships have to lose their way before finding home again, hit like, subscribe, and join me in this heartfelt story where a child unknowingly brings two grown-ups back together. Seattle, a late October afternoon. Rain drifted down like a thin veil of mist, cloaking the city in a silvery haze. Headlights shimmered across the slick pavement, stretching into trembling streaks of light in the cold air. In that moment, an ambulance turned sharply into the gates of Harborview Medical Center, its siren slicing through the silence. Essence Monroe ran close behind the stretcher, her hair damp and tangled, raincoat half open, shoes soaked through as they slapped against the slippery tiles. She had just finished her ER shift when the call came. Kyle, her 8-year-old son, was being rushed in with severe respiratory distress. The boy's struggling to breathe, oxygen's dropping fast. Room 317, ICU wing, the nurse on duty had said. Essence could barely hear anything beyond the pounding of her own heartbeat. Her breath came short, her fingers clenched the strap of her bag, her nurse's ID swinging against her chest. Everything blurred through the mist: footsteps, stretcher wheels, urgent voices. At the third-floor corridor, she stopped the first nurse she saw. "My son, they just brought him in by ambulance. Kyle Monroe. Room 317. End of the hall. Right side," the nurse answered quickly, pointing. Essence took off running, her heart slamming against her ribs. Just a few more steps, but then she froze. Across the corridor, in front of room 412, stood a man in a perfectly tailored black suit. His dark hair was touched with gray at the temples. The fluorescent light caught the sharp angles of his face, the same calm, confident expression she had once loved so painfully. Charles Webb, 8 years, 8 long years, and now he was here, in the same hospital, the same hallway, at the moment she feared most. "I need to see my wife right now," he said to the doctor, his voice low, restrained. A graceful woman in a white dress stepped forward, placing a hand over his. "Charles, darling, what did the doctor say?" It was unmistakably Vanessa Brooks Webb, the elegant socialite the magazines adored. Essence stepped back, swallowing hard. She should keep going, Kyle needed her. But her legs refused to move, as if rooted to the cold floor. Then Charles turned. His gaze swept the corridor and stopped on her. For an instant, every sound vanished. Only their eyes met two people who had once been everything to each other. Essence. His voice cracked, hoarse and disbelieving, her name falling from his lips like an old prayer. Vanessa frowned slightly. "Charles?" But he didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at her as if seeing a ghost. Essence turned away, gripping her bag, breathing deeply before forcing herself forward. She couldn't afford to break. Not now. Room 317's door stood open. Kyle lay small and fragile amid tubes and wires, an oxygen mask covering half his face. The steady hiss of the ventilator was cold, yet the only proof he was still alive. "My baby," Essence whispered, her trembling hand brushing his damp hair. She bent down and kissed his forehead, her tears mixing with the chill on his skin. A nurse entered quietly. "We're adjusting his medication. He's responding well, but we'll need to monitor him closely. You should rest a little." "No," Essence said softly, shaking her head. "I'm his mother. I'm staying." The night dragged on. The dim light fell across her exhausted face. She sat motionless on the metal chair, never letting go of her son's hand. Each beep of the monitor cut through her heart like a blade. Outside, the rain kept falling, and somewhere down the hall, in room 412, the man who had once walked out of her life lay awake as well. Morning came with a pale Seattle light. Raindrops from the night still clung to the ICU window, glimmering faintly. Essence had just dozed off when the sound of a cup being set down startled her. A cup of coffee, still black. 2 sugars, that's how you take it, right? That voice deep, warm, achingly familiar. Her heart stopped. She looked up. Charles stood there, no jacket now, just a white shirt with his tie loosened. The light through the glass caught silver threads in his hair. "What are you doing here?" Essence asked, her voice rough. I need to talk to you. There's nothing left to say. Charles drew a slow breath, his gaze softening. I didn't know, Essence. I didn't know I had a child. She gave a brittle laugh. Don't you dare, Charles. 8 years ago, I called you 3 times from the delivery room. You never answered. That's impossible, he said, shaking his head as if trying to remember. I never got those calls. Essence rose, her fists trembling. Don't lie to me again. Kyle grew up without a father, do you understand that? Charles looked through the glass to where Kyle slept beneath the tangle of tubes. If I'd known, I would have. Would have what? Quit your job? Left your fiancée? Given up everything to be a father? He was silent. The steady hum of the ventilator filled the space between them, the rhythm of 2 worlds barely connected. Essence, he murmured. The last email you sent me said you'd ended the pregnancy. She froze. What email? March 15. 8 years ago. Essence shook her head slowly. I never sent that. The truth fell between them like shattered glass. Charles's jaw tightened. My father. He was the only one with access to my email while I was stationed in Singapore. He did it to keep us apart. He thought you'd ruin my future. Her voice broke. 8 years. He stole 8 years from my child, Charles whispered. And from me. The door opened slightly. A nurse peeked in, hesitant. I'm sorry, but this is a restricted area. Only immediate family can stay. Charles looked straight at her. I'm the boy's father. Essence wanted to protest, but no words came. The nurse nodded. 10 minutes. When the door closed again, silence returned. Essence brushed Kyle's hair back gently. I'm staying with him. Charles nodded. I'll come back in the morning. We need to finish this. He stood momentarily longer, eyes fixed on his son's sleeping face. His voice trembled as he whispered, almost to himself, he's got my mother's chin. Essence bit her lip, something unfamiliar tightening in her chest. Go, Charles. He met her eyes one last time, then nodded. Tomorrow, Essence. I promise. When the door clicked shut, Essence sank into the chair. Outside, Seattle's pale sunlight filtered through lingering rain. Inside, the ventilator kept its steady rhythm, and for the first time in 8 years, she felt a new kind of fear take root, the fear that he might be telling the truth. Early the next morning, Seattle lay under a damp veil of fog. The grey autumn sky hung low, pressing down on the city like a heavy blanket. The sound of distant sirens and ferry horns blended into a melancholy symphony. Essence sat in the chair beside her son's hospital bed, a cup of cold coffee in her hand, dark circles shadowing her tired eyes. Kyle was stable now, his breathing steady and deep. He still looked fragile, pale, and had dry lips, but at least he was fighting. Essence exhaled softly, her hand resting over his small chest, making sure his heartbeat was still strong and persistent. A soft knock broke the quiet. Essence looked up. Charles Webb stood at the doorway, no longer the polished man in the tailored suit from last night. Today, he wore a simple shirt, no tie, no expensive watch, only the weariness of someone who hadn't slept. May I come in? He asked quietly. Essence didn't answer right away. She turned back to Kyle, then gave a slight nod. Charles stepped closer, stopping a few feet from the bed, his eyes fixed on the boy. I still can't believe I have a son, 8 years old. Don't talk like you're the victim in this story. Essence replied coolly. I'm not, he said, voice low. I'm just a man who was robbed of the chance to be a father. Essence's head lifted. Robbed? By an email I never sent, and a decision I never made. She said nothing. Charles went on, his tone deepening. Last night, I looked through my old messages. The email you mentioned, it doesn't exist in my inbox. There's only one dated March 15 saying you ended the pregnancy. But the IP address wasn't from Seattle. Essence frowned. You checked the IP? I had it traced this morning. It was sent from Webb Industries headquarters while I was in Singapore. The air in the room thickened. Your father, she whispered. Charles nodded slowly. Edward Webb Sr. He controlled everything, my emails, accounts, even my assistant. He always said a child born out of emotion would destroy my future. Essence let out a bitter laugh, and he made sure of it. Charles's hands clenched. I swear, if I'd known, I never would have left. Never. You can say that now, she murmured. But I sat alone in the delivery room 8 years ago. I called 3 times. No answer. I sent messages. Nothing. Do you know what that feels like? Charles bowed his head, the life in his eyes dimming. I don't. But I'll never forget what you just said. Rain began to fall outside, a soft, cold drizzle that muted the city's noise. Essence looked at her son. Kyle doesn't need a father who shows up when things are calm. He needs someone who was there when everything was chaos. Give me that chance, Charles said quietly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I want to start over, at least with him. Essence said nothing. Charles sighed, taking a step back. I won't push you. I'll wait outside, as long as it takes. But Essence, his voice trembled slightly, don't shut me out of his life again. Not if I can choose now. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Essence alone with the rain and the memories she'd tried to bury for 8 years. She bent down, holding Kyle's hand. My love, I don't know what's right or wrong anymore. I only know that every secret eventually finds the light. Outside, the Seattle sky blurred with mist, as heavy and uncertain as her heart. With Kyle fast asleep by noon, Essence stepped out of the ICU. She needed air, needed to breathe. Downstairs, the small cafe near the hospital lobby was open. She ordered a latte and stood by the window, watching the rain blur the streets and the faceless crowd below. Her mind drifted back to the time everything fell apart, when her belly grew heavier and she had no one to hold her hand. When she dropped out of med school, she worked night shifts to afford rent, milk, and diapers. She couldn't even hear his name for years without feeling something twist inside her. And now, he was again carrying all the ghosts she had buried. May I join you? Essence turned. Charles stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee. I thought you might need a refill, he said faintly. It's Seattle where it rains more than it shines, and coffee's practically a religion. She didn't smile, but she didn't send him away either. Charles sat down, keeping a careful distance. They sat silently for a while, listening to the soft patter of rain against the glass. My father passed away 2 years ago, he said suddenly. Essence looked up. Stroke, he continued. For the first time in my life, I didn't know whether to feel relief or grief. He was successful, ruthless, but what he left behind was emptiness. And a lie, Essence added quietly. He nodded. And a lie. They sat in silence again. I've realized, Charles said at last, maybe that was the price I had to pay to understand what loss really means. Essence didn't respond. But something small and fragile stirred inside her, not forgiveness, just a flicker of understanding for the emptiness in him. I don't expect you to believe me right away, Charles said, but from now on, I won't miss a single day of Kyle's life again. Whether you let me or not, I'll be here not as a billionaire, but as his father. Essence set her cup down, meeting his eyes. And your wife? Vanessa's recovering from surgery, he said calmly. I'll tell her the truth. She deserves that. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Essence sighed. This is a lot. Too much. Too fast. I know, Charles said gently. That's why I'm not rushing you. But tomorrow, when Kyle wakes up, I want to talk to him, just for a few minutes. Essence looked out the window, at the thin threads of rain falling like strands that tied the past to the present. All right, she said finally. A few minutes. Charles smiled softly, not the smile of victory, but of gratitude. Thank you. That afternoon, when Essence returned to the ICU, Kyle was awake. He looked up with a faint smile. Mom, who was that nice man who brought you coffee this morning? Essence brushed his hair gently. He's a friend, sweetheart. Kyle grinned sleepily. I like him. He looks like me. The simple words squeezed her heart. She turned away, hiding the tear that slipped down her cheek. The rain kept falling outside, but it didn't sound so cold this time. It sounded like the quiet overture of something about to begin again. On the 3rd morning since Kyle was admitted, a rare sliver of Seattle sunlight slipped through the thin hospital curtains, painting the ICU in a faint golden hue. Essence sat beside her son's bed, her hair loose and messy over her shoulders, her nurse's scrub still carrying the sharp scent of antiseptic. She hadn't been home since the first night. Last night's cold coffee sat untouched on the small tray next to her. Kyle slept peacefully. His color had improved, his breathing slow and steady. Every time the monitor blinked a solid 97, Essence exhaled softly, as if she were breathing alongside him. The door opened quietly. Charles stepped in, carrying a small paper bag from the cafe downstairs. Cappuccino for you, he said gently, setting it down. Didn't dare make it myself this time, afraid I'd mess up the ratio again. Essence looked at him. You don't have to do that. I know, Charles said with a faint smile, but I want to. The room fell into a fragile silence, filled only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors, the heartbeat of the space itself. Essence turned away, adjusting the blanket around Kyle. The doctor said they'll recheck his lungs this morning. If things look good, they might remove the support tube. Can I stay? You're a stranger, Charles. Not for long, he said softly. I won't be a stranger to my son much longer. Essence closed her eyes. His words ached sharp and warm all at once. Charles moved closer, careful not to cross the invisible line between them. He looked down at Kyle long and quietly. His eyes carried something strange, confusion, tenderness, and a touch of fear. He's got your eyes, Charles whispered. Essence nodded faintly. And your frown when he sleeps. Neither spoke again. It felt like even one more word might shatter the thin ice they stood upon. A knock broke the stillness. Dr. Whitman entered with 2 nurses. Good morning. How's our little patient today? Essence stood up, smiling politely. He slept well, just a light cough. Excellent. The doctor checked the monitors, then said, We'll try lowering the oxygen level, see how he responds. As the nurses adjusted the settings, Essence held Kyle's hand and whispered over and over, I'm right here, sweetheart. Deep breaths. You're doing so well. Charles stood nearby, eyes fixed on the screen. The numbers flickered 95, 96. Kyle's brow furrowed slightly, but his breathing stayed steady. Good, Dr. Whitman murmured. His lungs are beginning to work on their own again. Essence let out a shaky breath, tears welling in her eyes. She leaned down and kissed her son's forehead. Kyle stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. His voice was raspy. Mom, I'm here, baby, she whispered, squeezing his hand. Then his gaze drifted to the man standing by the door. Who's that man? Time froze. Charles looked at Essence, waiting for her cue. He's a friend of mine, she said softly. He's been helping me take care of you. Kyle gave a faint smile through his smaller oxygen mask. Thank you, mister. Charles's voice broke a little. You're welcome, champ. You're courageous. Kyle's eyes twinkled weakly. I just want to go home. Hospitals are boring. Essence smiled. Soon, sweetheart. The doctor says you'll be home before you know it. He nodded sleepily, then drifted back to rest. Charles stood watching them, a small, quiet scene that tightened something in his chest. 8 years, without this image, and living in a house filled with echoes but no laughter. He turned to her. Thank you, for keeping him alive, for raising him so well. Essence's tone was flat. I didn't do it for you. I know, Charles said softly, but I'm still grateful. Dr. Whitman returned a moment later, smiling. If his progress continues like this, he can leave the ICU tomorrow. For the first time in days, Essence smiled, a fragile kind of relief blooming in her eyes. When everyone else left, the room fell quiet again, just the 2 adults and the sleeping child. You should rest a little, Charles said. Let me watch him for you. Essence shook her head. No need. I promise I'll just sit here. She hesitated. Part of her was still guarded, the other part too tired to resist. All right, she said finally. If he wakes up, tell him I just stepped out. As the door closed behind her, Charles sat down beside the bed. His large hand reached out, gently enclosing the tiny fingers resting on the blanket. Warmth spread through him, a kind of peace he'd never known until this moment. My boy, he whispered. It's your dad. By late afternoon, the fading Seattle light turned golden against the ICU glass. Essence returned after a quick sandwich in the cafeteria and froze. She saw Charles sitting through the window with his chin resting on his hand, the other holding Kyle's. His lips moved slowly. Kyle was awake, listening intently and smiling. The first smile since he'd been admitted. Essence walked in, trying to sound casual. What's so funny? Kyle turned toward her. Mr. Charles told me that when he was 16, he fell into a lake but saved his phone. Essence raised an eyebrow. Impressive. Don't laugh, Charles said, voice warm. I thought I was a superhero. And you've hated cold water ever since? She asked lightly. He chuckled. Exactly. Kyle giggled, a slight cough following. Essence leaned down, patting his back. Easy, love. I'm fine, Kyle said softly. Mom, can Mr. Charles tell me more stories tomorrow? Essence glanced at Charles. He said nothing, just gave a quiet, hopeful nod. Maybe, Essence said, if you finish all your soup. Kyle grinned, nodding solemnly like it was a serious deal. After Kyle drifted back to sleep that night, Essence gathered a few things from the bedside table. Her voice was calm, almost tender. You made him laugh for the first time in days. Charles looked at her, and I laughed for the first time in 8 years. Her breath caught. You're staying in Seattle? She asked cautiously. I cancelled my business trip, he said, eyes on the boy. From now on, everything I am starts here. Essence studied him quietly. Charles, you can't just show up and think things will return to what they were. I don't want what we had, he said firmly but softly. I want a new beginning. She gave a small, sad smile. You make it sound so simple after 8 years. It's not, he said. But I can't live another 8 without knowing what my son's laughter sounds like. Silence filled the room again. Essence brushed Kyle's hair and whispered, He needs stability, Charles, not another storm. I didn't come to be the storm, he said gently. I came to be on the shore. Her heart skipped a beat. She hated how much those words moved her. There was something different in his eyes, not the ambition of the man she once knew, but the depth of someone who had learned what love costs. All right, she said finally. When they move Kyle out of the ICU tomorrow, you can stay, but don't make me regret it. Charles only nodded, a faint smile flickering across his lips. They both sat there in silence, watching the sleeping boy, his breathing even, peaceful. Outside, night fell over Seattle. Streetlights shimmered on the wet glass, stretching into long golden streaks, fragile, beautiful, and almost unbearably tender. Essence spoke softly, her voice drifting through the quiet. Maybe some truths are buried so long that when they finally surface, they're no longer meant to hurt but to heal. Charles looked at her, eyes calm and full of something wordless. He didn't answer, only nodded, as if making a silent promise to the future. The morning Kyle was discharged, Seattle was raining again. The drizzle was fine as silk, just enough to wet a shoulder and make the air smell clean and alive. Essence stood by the hospital window, the discharge papers in her hand, feeling light and heavy. The past 7 days had felt like a month, but finally, Kyle was well. He laughed more now, ate better, and said he wanted to go home and sleep in the blanket that smells like Mom. Charles appeared at the doorway. He looked different, calmer, softer, a simple grey sweater, hair slightly tousled from the rain, eyes deep but steady. In his hand, a small brown paper gift bag. You're early, Essence said quietly. I couldn't sleep, Charles admitted. Didn't want to miss the first moment he leaves the hospital. Kyle's head lifted at the sound of his voice. Charles, his voice bright and clear like morning light. Hey, buddy, Charles smiled. Ready to go home? Yes, but the doctor said no running. Then I'll walk really slow so you won't have to run. Essence laughed for the first time in days. It was laughter without fatigue. Charles sat beside Kyle and handed him the little bag. Got you something small, so going home won't feel boring. Kyle opened it, his eyes lighting up. Whoa, a red Nintendo Switch? Essence frowned slightly. You didn't have to. I know, Charles said gently, cutting her off the same tone he'd used that morning in the ICU when he brought coffee. Kyle hugged the console like a treasure. Thank you. Charles's voice softened. Take good care of it, okay? I'll need to learn how to play to keep up with you. Essence packed their things, her heart tangled in quiet confusion. She knew she should say something distant and keep the walls up, but surrounded by Kyle's laughter and the warmth in Charles's eyes, she couldn't bring herself to it. Dr. Whitman came in with a smile, holding the final papers. Kyle's made wonderful progress. Keep his medication regular, watch for breathing issues, and most importantly, avoid cold air. I want to see this little champ again in a week. Thank you, Doctor, Essence replied, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. The doctor glanced at Charles and smiled. This boy's lucky to have both his parents here. Essence opened her mouth, but Charles spoke first. We're the lucky ones to have him. On the way down to the lobby, Charles strolled, one hand on Kyle's wheelchair, the other holding a large umbrella. Essence walked beside them, silent. Neither spoke, but something subtle had shifted, as if they were relearning how to walk side by side, one careful step at a time. Outside, the rain had begun to fade. When the car pulled up in front of Essence's apartment on Capitol Hill, Kyle was asleep in the back seat, clutching his new game console. Essence turned to him and whispered, "Thank you for bringing us home." Charles nodded. "I promised. No more missing days." He stepped out, opened the back door, and carefully lifted Kyle. The tenderness in his movement made Essence's chest tighten, not with fear, but with the quiet ache of realizing this was something he should have been allowed to do years ago. Her apartment was small but warm. Kyle's drawings covered the walls, photos of the two framed the shelves, and the faint scent of toast lingered from the breakfast she'd never finished that morning. Charles lay Kyle gently on the couch, pulling a blanket over him. He stood still for a long moment. "This is his home?" "Yes," Essence said softly. "He calls it our world, just me and him." Charles nodded slowly, his gaze falling on a framed photo. Essence holding a newborn Kyle, exhausted but smiling a smile he'd never seen before. "I wasn't there," he murmured. "I should have been there for all of it." "You can't change the past," Essence said quietly. "Only the present, Charles." He looked at her for a long moment. "Then let me have a chance at the present." She turned away, saying nothing. Before leaving, Charles placed a thick envelope on the table. "Don't get the wrong idea," he said as she frowned. "It's health insurance and school funds for Kyle. I'm not trying to buy my place. I want to make sure you never have to worry again. You think I need your money. I know you don't," he said softly, almost apologetically. "But Kyle deserves the security you've been carrying alone. Let me carry part of it now." He paused at the door. "I'll call tomorrow just to check in. Is that okay?" Essence hesitated, then nodded. "After 4. Kyle usually naps then." Charles smiled faintly. "I'll remember." When the door closed, the apartment sank into stillness. Essence looked down at the envelope and opened it. Inside were the insurance papers and a handwritten note, in Charles's familiar script. "Essence, I don't want to use money or contracts to bind you. I want you to know I'm serious. Nothing will happen unless you agree. Charles." She set the letter down, her eyes drifting toward the couch where Kyle slept peacefully, his cheeks flushed with color, his lips curved into a small smile. A tear slipped down her cheek, landing on the edge of the envelope, spreading into a faint stain. Outside, the clouds broke apart, letting a thin beam of light spill across the rooftops. Essence poured herself a cup of tea and stood by the window, gazing over the city. Seattle was still gray, still damp, but something had begun to glow inside her. A quiet, gentle light, not bright enough to be blind, just enough to believe that the past was finding its way home. A week after coming home, the small apartment on Capitol Hill was alive again. The sound of Kyle's laughter, the click of his game console, the soft whistle of wind through a half-open window. Everything seemed normal. But Essence knew normal was just a thin layer over deep water, hiding the quiet storm beneath. Every day, Charles called. Never for long, just a few minutes to ask how Kyle was feeling, whether he'd taken his medicine or eaten. Kyle was always eager, chatting non-stop about his Lego robot, the sandwiches Mom made, and how he wanted to go to the zoo when I'm totally better. Essence would sit beside him, listening to their voices, her heart warm and aching. She could feel it. Charles was slowly becoming part of her son's world. A world that, for 8 years, had belonged only to the two of them. But Kyle still didn't know the truth, and she was afraid. Afraid that moment when it came might shatter the fragile peace she and Charles had just rebuilt. Or worse, it would wound the innocence of the boy she'd protected all her life. That Friday night, after Kyle finished his math homework, he turned and asked, "Mom, why does Mr. Charles look like me?" The question made Essence freeze. The pen slipped from her fingers. "How do you mean, sweetheart?" Kyle tilted his head, those dark eyes so pure and curious. His eyes, his hair, the way he smiles. "My friend said maybe he's my uncle." Essence smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You really think you look that much alike?" "A lot. And he talks to me like he already knows me." Her heart pounded. Maybe it's time. After Kyle brushed his teeth and climbed into bed, Essence sat beside him. The lamp cast a soft golden glow across his face. "Kyle," she began gently, "do you remember when you asked about your dad?" He nodded. "You said he couldn't be with us, but he'd love me if he knew me." "That's right," Essence said softly, "and I meant it. But tonight, I think you're old enough to hear the rest." Kyle blinked. "The rest?" She swallowed hard. "Do you remember Mr. Charles?" "Of course. He calls a lot. I like him." Essence took a breath. That's because Mr. Charles is your dad, Kyle. The air went utterly still. Essence could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Kyle sat frozen for a few seconds, then blinked slowly. Mr. Charles is my dad? Yes. But why didn't he tell me? The question cut straight through her. Because I wanted to tell you first, she whispered. Charles didn't know you existed for a long time, honey. There was a terrible misunderstanding that made him believe I didn't keep you. Tears welled in Kyle's eyes. So, he knows now? Yes. And he loves you very much. He wants to make it right. Kyle stared at his hands, his voice barely a breath. 8 years, and he just found out? Essence nodded. That's right. But what matters now is that he knows, and he's not going anywhere. Silence. Then, with eyes glistening, Kyle looked up. Mom, can I call him Dad? Essence squeezed his hand. Only if you really want to. I want to. She couldn't hold back anymore. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she pulled him into her arms, kissing his hair. You don't know, she whispered. How many times I prayed for you to say those words. Kyle wrapped his small arms around her neck. I'm not mad, Mom. I want a dad. Outside, the Seattle rain fell softly against the window. Mother and son held each other inside, their fears dissolving into warmth. The next morning, rare sunlight filled the kitchen. Essence made coffee, staring blankly at her laptop, unable to focus. Outside, Kyle sat quietly with his switch quieter than usual. When the phone rang, she knew who it was. Good morning, came Charles's voice, low and gentle, like a smile. Good morning, she replied, gripping her cup. Can I stop by? I've got a few of Kyle's toys he left at the hospital. She hesitated. Okay. But Charles, yes? I told him. There was silence on the other end, then his voice, unsteady. Thank you. When he arrived, it was Kyle who opened the door. The boy stood there momentarily, studying him, then whispered, Hi, Dad. Charles froze. Those two small words stopped the air itself. He dropped to one knee, eyes wet. Are you sure, Kyle? Kyle nodded, his smile trembling. I want to call you that. Charles opened his arms and pulled him close, holding him as though afraid the moment would vanish if he let go. His hands trembled, his breath uneven. Essence watched in silence, her heart both aching and light. When Kyle ran off to show them a toy car, Charles rose, his eyes glistening. I never thought I'd hear someone call me Dad, he said hoarsely. Thank you for giving me that. I didn't do it for you, Charles, Essence said softly. I did it for him. I know, he murmured. But whatever the reason, you saved me from a life that meant nothing. That afternoon, the three of them walked to the park nearby. Kyle walked in the middle, holding one hand from each of them. The sound of dry leaves underfoot, the scent of damp grass, the laughter of other children carried on the breeze, all of it felt like a dream. Essence once had, then lost, and was now living again. On the way home, Kyle looked up and asked, Dad, can we get ice cream? Charles laughed. Best idea I've heard all day. Essence watched them, the sunlight catching in their matching dark brown hair and their heads' identical tilt when they smiled. And she thought, sometimes the truth isn't something to fear. Sometimes it's a gift, late, but still in time to heal. That night, Kyle fell asleep early. Essence stepped onto the balcony, leaning against the railing, gazing at the city lights shimmering like scattered stars. Charles joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. I don't want to go home, he said quietly. But you have to. I know. I'm just afraid I'll wake up tomorrow and find out this was all a dream. Essence looked at him, her voice soft. It's not a dream, Charles. Just a beginning that came a little late. Better late than never, he said. She smiled, a small, honest smile. Below, the wind carried the damp scent of Lake Union through the streets, wrapping around 2 people who had once lost each other, now learning how to stay in the same place again. Seattle, late December. The city had sunk into its longest stretch of rain. Everything felt damp. Every morning was wrapped in a pale, misty gray. Essence had settled into a new rhythm: mornings when Charles drove Kyle to school, afternoons when he called to remind him to take his medicine, weekends when they met at the park or the little ice cream shop near the pier. She'd never thought she'd be able to say it, but honestly life was getting better. Until that morning, when Essence returned home after an early hospital shift, she saw a white envelope at her door. No sender's name. Just a neat signature on the back. Vanessa Webb. Her hand froze. Vanessa Charles's wife. The woman Essence had only ever seen in magazine photos and once, briefly, in a hospital hallway. The woman who'd shared 8 years with him, while she'd been fighting alone to raise their son. Essence carried the envelope inside. Inside wasn't a letter, but a business card and a small handwritten note. "We need to talk. Alone. VW." No anger in the words, just a chill precision that cut through the paper itself. That afternoon, while Kyle was at school, Essence waited at a quiet cafe by the harbor. The air smelled of roasted beans and sea rain. The door opened. Vanessa stepped in. They didn't need introductions. The two women looked at each other and both knew. Vanessa Webb was striking, poised, elegant, with cool gray-blue eyes and hair the color of honey pulled into a perfect knot. She wore a cream trench coat, her presence graceful yet sharp, like someone who always knew exactly who she was. Essence rose, polite but distant. "Thank you for coming." "I couldn't not come," Vanessa replied, her tone even. 2 coffees arrived. Silence stretched between them, the rain outside tapping a steady rhythm like the heartbeat of the conversation about to unfold. Vanessa spoke first. "Charles told me everything. About Kyle. About you." Essence gave a slight nod. "He also told me," Vanessa continued, "that he wouldn't hide any of it." She smiled faintly, not bitterly, but with the exhaustion of someone holding herself together for too long. "It's strange," she said softly. "All my life, I believed I knew the man I married. I was never allowed to see until I realized there was a part of him, a part of his heart." Essence stayed silent. No defense, no excuses. "I thought," Vanessa went on, "that when a man leaves his past behind, it stays there. But apparently, there are women he never truly leaves." Essence lifted her gaze, calm but firm. "I didn't pull him back, Vanessa. He found his son, our son. And I couldn't be cruel enough to stop that." Vanessa's lips curved in a sad, knowing smile. "You're not cruel. You're honest. Maybe that's why he can't forget you." The words landed like frost. Essence's spine went cold. "What do you want from me, Vanessa?" Vanessa set her cup down and looked out the window, her reflection pale against the rain. "I'm not here to fight. I just needed to hear from you that you don't intend to destroy my marriage." Essence answered slowly. "No one can destroy a powerful marriage, Vanessa." A long silence followed. Vanessa exhaled, her voice keyed in now. "I thought I was strong until I saw the way he looked at you in that hospital hallway. That look, it's one he's never given me." Essence said nothing. Vanessa rose. "If you really don't want him, say it. Because if he chooses to stay, I'll walk away, but I refuse to lie to myself anymore." She left money on the table, then walked out straight-backed, composed, the kind of woman who knew she was losing something precious, but refused to lose her dignity with it. Essence stayed seated, staring at the untouched coffee. What filled her wasn't pride, it was quiet sorrow. Another woman was hurting, for the same man she had once loved and hated in equal measure. That afternoon, Charles came to pick Kyle up from school, as he always did. Essence waited at the gate. When he approached, she immediately saw the exhaustion in his eyes and the weight in his voice. "Vanessa came to see me," she said flatly. He stopped. His expression darkened slightly. "I figured she would." "You figured and still let her?" "She needed to hear it from you," he said quietly. "Not from me." Essence's tone turned cold. "You've turned me into a character in your marriage drama, Charles." "No," he replied, calm but weary. "I'm just giving everyone a chance to be honest." Kyle's laughter broke the tension as he ran up. "Dad, Mom, my teacher picked me for the solar system project." Charles smiled, crouching down. "Then we'd better build an entire galaxy at home." Essence smiled back at her son, but her eyes stayed sad. When Kyle ran ahead to the car, she turned to Charles. "Vanessa's hurting," she said softly. "She may look strong, but you made her come to me for reassurance. Do you realize what that means?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, "I never meant to hurt anyone, but I can't keep living as if Kyle doesn't exist." "I'm not asking you to choose," she replied, trembling. "I just need you to understand someone will get hurt, even your son." For a moment, the world felt still. Charles stepped closer, his tone low and sincere. "Essence, I'm not trying to fight. I'm trying to rebuild. But to do that, I might have to close a door completely." She looked at him, long and searching. "Are you sure you're brave enough for that, Charles? Because closing a door isn't just about leaving someone behind. It's about leaving behind the version of yourself that lived there. He said nothing. That night, after Kyle was asleep, Essence sat alone at the kitchen table, listening to the rain against the glass. She thought of Vanessa's eyes, proud but broken, of Charles's tired yet resolute. Between the two, she felt utterly lost. Outside, the streetlights shimmered gold across the puddles, and she wondered, does the past ever really let us go, when it still wears the face of someone we haven't forgotten? The answer came when her phone lit up. Charles was calling. She hesitated, then picked up. His voice was rough. "I told Vanessa we need to separate." His tone had no triumph, only sorrow and a strange kind of peace. Essence was silent for a long moment before she whispered, "I'm sorry for both of you." "I don't regret it," he said, "but it hurts, that it makes you feel guilty." Outside, the rain had stopped. The city lay still under the quiet of a sleepless night. Essence looked out the window, at the lights reflecting over the lake, and she knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same again from this moment on. 3 weeks after that fateful meeting, Seattle shifted seasons. The rain hadn't stopped, but had softened, shorter, lighter. Now and then, a shy beam of sunlight slipped through the clouds, washing the wet streets in silver light. Essence stood by the fridge, pressing up a child's crayon, drawing a 2-story house with a yard and a tree in the middle. Below it, written in uneven pencil, "Home is Mom, Dad, and me." 6 small words, and they caught in her throat. Since that meeting with Vanessa, Charles had stopped coming over in the evenings. He still called daily, picked Kyle up, and dropped him off. But there was distance now. Essence understood. It was his way of giving space for her, Vanessa, and everyone to let the world adjust. Until that Saturday afternoon. Kyle had just finished soccer practice under a misty drizzle. When Essence arrived, she saw Charles already there, not the crisp businessman she'd once known, but a father in a navy sweater, holding a water bottle and a small jacket. "Dad, I scored 2 goals," Kyle shouted, running to him. Charles crouched, catching him in an embrace. "That's my champ." Essence stopped momentarily, watching them, her heart warming quietly and unexpectedly. After the game, Charles asked, "Can I take you both out to dinner? Just pizza, nothing fancy." Essence hesitated but smiled when she saw the light in Kyle's eyes. "All right." They went to a small pizzeria by Lake Union, soft yellow lights, acoustic music, and the smell of dough and rain. Kyle chattered non-stop about school, his solar system project, and wanting to build the planets out of clay instead of paper. Charles listened, really listened, never interrupting once. Essence watched him, a strange mix of peace and fragility rising inside her. She remembered 8 years ago, when she thought Charles would choose the baby crib, taking photos at Kyle's first birthday. They were at the same table again, with years between them like an invisible wall. After dinner, Charles drove them home. At the corner of their street, he said quietly, "I'm looking for a place nearby, maybe just a few blocks from here. Easier to pick Kyle up." Essence was silent for a moment. "You're really starting over, aren't you?" He nodded. "I think this is my first time living honestly." She looked at him but said nothing more. Streetlights streamed through the windshield, lighting their faces, 2 people tired, but somehow at peace for the first time in a long while. A few days later, Charles moved into a small apartment near the lake. No mansion, no chauffeur, just a man surrounded by ordinary things, breathing easier than he had in years. That evening, he called. "I hung up all of Kyle's photos. You should see it, he's already taking over half the wall." Essence laughed softly. "I believe it. He's taken over my life. Half a wall sounds reasonable." His voice warmed. "Thank you for still letting me have a corner of that world." With Charles nearby, Kyle's life grew brighter. Every afternoon, he waited by the window for his dad, adding new drawings to the fridge, all with 3 figures now. Essence tried to keep things steady, still the single mother, still cautious. But inside, the boundaries she'd built for 8 years were slowly cracking. One morning, she brought Kyle to school and found Charles waiting out front, holding 2 coffee cups. "Black, 2 sugars," he said with a slight grin. She blinked, surprised. That was the exact order from years ago when she was 27, in a tiny cafe in Brooklyn, where it had all begun. "You've got a good memory," she murmured. "I've forgotten too many other things," he said softly. "This one, I didn't dare forget." At that moment, sunlight broke through the clouds. The light fell across his face, catching the faint lines near his eyes, not marks of weariness, but of someone who'd lost and learned to cherish what was found again. That night, Kyle had dinner at his father's new place for the first time. Charles cooked overcooked pasta, a little too salty, but Kyle ate every bite, grinning. "Dad, it's better than the restaurant," he declared proudly. Essence laughed. "You're a natural encourager." Charles glanced at her, half smiling. He gets that from his mom. Later, while Kyle watched a cartoon, the two adults sat on the lake balcony. Seattle at night was still, the lights rippling on the water like scattered stars. Essence spoke first. "Has Vanessa called?" "Yes," he said quietly. "We're finalizing the divorce. No fighting, no headlines. Just ending a journey never meant to go that way." "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Don't be," he said. "Some endings must happen, so the right things can begin." They sat in silence, listening to the soft lapping of water. The moonlight shimmered on their half-empty wine glasses. Then Charles said, "I bought a small piece of land outside the city. There's a yard, a tree. Kyle will love it. I want your help designing the house." Essence turned to him. "You want me to help design your house?" He smiled gently. "No. I want you to help build our house." The words were quiet, but they sent a tremor through her heart. She drew in a deep breath. "Charles, we're only halfway there. I'm still scared." "So am I," he admitted. "But I spent 8 years being scared of losing you. I'd rather spend the rest of my life trying not to." Essence didn't answer, but in the soft glow of night, she caught her reflection in his eyes. Not the woman he'd lost years ago, but the one slowly finding her way back. Through moments like this, calm and genuine, where love began to feel safe again. April in Seattle. The air was soft, the rain lighter. Cherry blossoms lined both sides of Green Lake like a pale pink scarf across the path. Essence was helping Kyle paint his solar system model when the phone rang. The screen lit up. "Charles." She smiled as she answered. "Hey, you." His voice was gentle, but there was something different in it. "My mother just landed this morning. She wants to meet Kyle. And you." Essence froze. "Your mother?" "Yes. You don't have to say yes, but I think this is something she needs." Essence fell silent. Memories she thought she'd buried rose all at once. The early years when she and Charles first fell in love, when Mrs. Elizabeth Webb had made her disapproval crystal clear. To the Webbs, she'd been the local girl from the wrong class. And after the breakup, they had never seen each other again. "I don't want to make her uncomfortable," Essence murmured. Charles's reply was firm, but soft. "You won't. She deserves the truth now, and she's not the cold woman my father made her out to be." Essence's fingers traced over the small, blue-painted sphere in front of her. "Kyle's Earth," as he'd called it. "The planet where Mom and Dad live," he had said. She smiled faintly, though the warmth was tangled with worry. 3 days later, they met at a small lakeside restaurant overlooking Lake Washington. The space was elegant but calm, sunlight spilling through expansive windows. Essence arrived early with Kyle, who looked neat and earnest in a freshly pressed white shirt. He bounced in his seat, eager and unaware of the weight in the air. When the door opened, Charles entered beside a silver-haired woman in a tailored coat, her posture graceful, her presence composed yet kind. Elizabeth Webb. Essence rose, her pulse quickening. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Webb," she said softly. The older woman paused, studying her for a long moment. "We've met before," she said gently, "and that time, I wasn't fair to you." Essence couldn't find words. Kyle looked up at her curiously. "Grandma, are you Dad's mom?" A faint smile touched Elizabeth's lips. "Yes, sweetheart. And you must be Kyle." "Yes, ma'am." "I've seen your photos," she said, eyes warming. "But in person, you're even more wonderful." Kyle blushed, grinning shyly. They Saturday. At first, the air was taut with formality, but Elizabeth soon eased it with her steady, storytelling voice. She asked Kyle about school, his friends, and his science project. Kyle answered enthusiastically. Essence listened quietly, gradually letting the tension melt away. When Charles took Kyle outside to watch the ducks by the lake, Elizabeth turned to Essence. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for raising such a remarkable boy. I can't imagine the strength it took to do it alone." Essence shook her head. "I only did what I had to do." "No," Elizabeth said, eyes filled with sincerity. "You did what the Webbs were too cowardly to do. You kept what was right, even after being left behind. A breeze drifted through the open window, tugging gently at the white curtain. Essence's throat tightened. Elizabeth continued, "My husband interfered with your letters. I found out only after he passed. Charles never knew you kept the baby." Essence's eyes softened, turning toward the lake, where Charles and Kyle laughed. "I know. Now, I do." The older woman nodded, her smile tinged with regret. "And I spent 8 years learning that real love isn't about social class. It's only ever about timing." Essence said nothing. Some apologies didn't need length, just the courage to be spoken aloud. That alone was enough to bring tears. The meeting ended with genuine embraces. Elizabeth bent to kiss Kyle's forehead, then looked at Essence. "I won't ask you to forgive me," she said, "but I'd like to be part of his life if you'll let me." "You don't need to ask," Essence replied, trembling. "Kyle deserves a grandmother." Elizabeth smiled, her eyes bright. "And I need a grandson." That evening, after Charles drove his mother back to her hotel, Essence took Kyle for a walk by the lake. The water mirrored the gold of the setting sun, stretching its shadows long and slender across the damp path. "Mom," Kyle said quietly, "Grandma told me when Dad was my age, he used to catch fireflies by the river. She said he was really naughty." Essence laughed softly. "Oh, I believe that. He hasn't changed much, maybe runs a little slower now." Kyle squeezed her hand. "I'm glad Grandma likes me. I was scared she'd be mad at you." Essence looked down at him, her smile tender. "No one's mad, sweetheart. Grown-ups take longer to understand each other sometimes." When they got home, a bouquet of tulips and a handwritten card were waiting on the kitchen table. The elegant handwriting read, "Dear Essence, thank you for not closing the door on the past. Thank you for letting me see the best part of my son in your son, Elizabeth Webb." Essence set the card down, her heart swelling with something she couldn't quite name. It was not pure relief, but a peaceful ache, like standing before an old house whose doors had finally opened, even though no one remained inside to ask, "Why did we lose each other back then?" That night, Charles called. "Thank you," he said. "Mom told me she hasn't seen me this happy in years." Essence smiled. "She's a kinder woman than I ever expected. She said you're the reason I finally grew up." Essence chuckled. "You sound like you enjoyed hearing that." "Maybe," Charles said, a smile in his voice. "Mostly because it's true." A warm silence followed. From the living room came Kyle's laughter as he replayed a video of their day at the lake. Essence sat by the window, watching the sky clear after the rain stars scattered bright over the city, and she realized, some storms don't come to destroy. They come to cleanse, to give everyone a chance to begin again. Deep inside, she felt something shifting, no longer guardedness, but trust. No longer just duty, but love. Love once more, slower this time, but real. Summer arrived gently in Seattle. Mornings were clear, sunlight shimmered over the lake, and long afternoons stretched into golden evenings, filled with children's laughter echoing through the park until dusk. In Essence's small house, life breathed in a calm rhythm, the kind that only comes after a long storm. Kyle had grown used to seeing both his parents in the same frame. His drawings now always had 3 people, sometimes 4, when he included Grandma Elizabeth. And in one recent picture, he had scribbled 3 small words in the corner, "A real family." Essence kept that page in her desk drawer, next to an old photo of her and Charles taken 8 years ago by the Brooklyn waterfront. They had laughed then, unaware of how easily love could slip through time. That afternoon, Charles called. "I just wrapped up a deal in Portland," he said. "I've got the weekend free. Can I steal you and Kyle for a day, somewhere close?" "Where to?" "Whidbey Island. You once said you wanted to take Kyle whale watching." She laughed softly. "You remember something I said 8 years ago?" "I remember everything we never got to do," he said, light enough to make her heart tremble. They left on Saturday morning. The ferry glided slowly across the water, leaving a silver trail behind. The sea breeze smelled of salt and sun, whipping through Essence's hair. Charles watched her, squinting against the light. "I'd forgotten what this feels like," he murmured. "What feeling?" she asked. "Standing next to you, without needing to explain myself." She smiled faintly, turning back to the waves. Kyle darted across the deck, laughing, his voice mingling with the cry of seagulls, the sound of life finding its rhythm again. At noon, they stopped at a small seafood shack by the sand. Charles helped Kyle peel shrimp, sharing stories about how he'd been terrified of the ocean as a boy. Essence sat quietly, watching them, the two halves of her heart, the man and the child, and felt something strange and familiar rise within her. It felt like looking straight into her future, gentler, safer this time. By late afternoon, the sky turned gold. They walked along the beach, Kyle running ahead to collect shells. Behind him, the two adults strolled, close enough to feel each other's warmth but far enough to be caught in memory. "Charles," Essence said softly. "Yeah? If there had been no misunderstanding, do you think we would have made it?" He paused, steps slowing, then said quietly, "Maybe we would have fallen apart anyway, Essence, but at least I wouldn't have spent 8 years wondering if you ever truly loved me." She met his eyes, voice barely above a whisper. "I never stopped loving you. I just stopped hoping." Charles stopped walking. He looked at her, long and steady. The wind lifted a strand of hair across her cheek. He reached out, gently tucking it behind her ear, the same simple gesture from years ago that made her chest ache. "I won't say I'm sorry anymore," he said slowly. "Sorry, it doesn't change the years we lost. But if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving I won't lose us again." Essence's eyes glistened. "Charles, I don't know if I'm brave enough to love you again. Then let me be brave for both of us." He took one step closer but didn't touch her. He just stood there, one heartbeat away. And in that fragile stillness, the sun dipped low over the water, wrapping them in a light as soft as forgiveness. After that day, life seemed to return to normal, only it wasn't the same. Charles came by more often, not just for Kyle, but for dinners, for quiet talks. Essence no longer avoided him, though every time their eyes met, her pulse still stumbled the same nervous rhythm it had the day he first came back. One evening, after Kyle had fallen asleep, Charles stayed to help clean up the kitchen. When the last dish was done, she turned and found him watching her. "I don't think I've ever been happier than I am right now," he said softly. "Just being here, with you, with him." Essence dried her hands, her voice low. "I'm afraid it's all moving too fast." "Then we'll slow down," he replied, "as long as we don't stop." Silence, only the clock ticking, and rain whispering against the porch. She took one step forward, then another. The space between them vanished into the sound of their breathing. Charles lifted a hand, hesitant, as if she might disappear. "Essence," he whispered, "if I kissed you now, would you push me away?" Her gaze didn't waver. There was no anger, no armor, only a tired tenderness. "I don't know," she said. "But if you don't, maybe I will." Time seemed to hold its breath. Then he leaned in. The kiss was gentle, unsure, trembling, but it carried everything words had failed to say. Outside, the rain thickened, drumming softly against the windows, keeping time with the wild, fragile beating of two hearts rediscovering home. Essence rested her head against his chest. "I'm still scared," she whispered. "I know," Charles said, "but loving you never scared me. Losing you did." That night, they said nothing more. They sat together on the sofa, watching the streetlights glow through the rain. It wasn't a dramatic beginning, just two people who had survived the worst, now quietly choosing peace. Essence thought, maybe real love isn't about reigniting the old fire, it's learning how to keep each other warm from the ashes. And Charles smiled faintly, glancing down at her sleeping against his shoulder. He whispered, almost to himself, "I've finally found my way home." Late summer in Seattle, a rare, brilliant blue sky, so clear you could trace each strand of cloud drifting lazily across it. Kyle had just turned 9, growing faster than Essence could believe. He loved making pancakes on Sunday mornings, fixing his old bike with his dad in the yard, and curling up by the window to read, where the afternoon sun fell across the floor in long, golden ribbons. Their new home on Mercer Island was finally finished after 3 months, a small white house with a wooden porch and a tall maple tree in the yard. Kyle had already claimed it as the site for his mini observatory, where he said he'd watch the stars with his dad. Essence called it the House of 3, not perfect, not grand, just full of laughter. That first morning after moving in, she woke early. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, spilling across the half-unpacked boxes on the kitchen table. Charles walked in, hair damp from a shower, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I remembered," he said, placing the black coffee with 2 sugars before her. She smiled. "If you'd forgotten, I'd start worrying about your memory." They sat in quiet contentment, a simple stillness, yet something Essence had once thought she'd never know again. Outside, Kyle ran in circles with the little rescue dog they'd adopted from the shelter. He named her Nova, after the first star Charles had taught him to find in the night sky. "Moom, Dad," Kyle shouted. "Nova can catch the ball now." Essence laughed, turning to Charles. "Isn't it strange?" she said. "What is?" "That we lost each other over a misunderstanding, but found our way back because of a child and a dog." Charles chuckled. That deep, warm sound she'd missed. The universe has its own way of fixing what people break. They stepped out onto the porch together. The morning light brushed their shoulders. The smell of fresh, cut grass and coffee mingled in the air. And there it was, the sight Essence had once thought belonged only in dreams. Kyle laughing, Charles chasing him, Nova barking, the wind carrying a sound that felt unmistakably like home. That afternoon, while Kyle napped, Charles called her into the yard. "I have something to show you," he said. He pointed toward the big maple tree, where a small wooden sign hung gently in the breeze. "The Monroe Webb home, since 2024. Essence touched the carved letters with trembling fingers. "This is Kyle and I. We made it last night," he said. "What do you think?" She laughed through sudden tears. "I think it's the most beautiful sign in the world." Charles wrapped his arms around her from behind, his voice low and rough against her ear. "I used to have everything except a home. Now I only have 2 people. And somehow, that's everything." Essence leaned back against him, eyes closed. In that moment, she knew she didn't need any more promises. They were already living what they'd spent years searching for: peace, truth, and a simple, steady kind of love. Autumn came quietly. The maple leaves turned amber and orange, falling like tiny fragments of the past carried off by the wind. Kyle started 3rd grade, proudly telling his teacher, "Both my parents came to the conference together." He filled the house with noise stories about his robot project, laughter that reached every corner. And sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he'd write in his little notebook, "I like it when Mom and Dad laugh together." One night, Essence stepped onto the balcony after tucking Kyle into bed. Charles sat in the wooden chair, laptop open but forgotten, his gaze lost in the stars. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "The stars," he said. "Funny how they're always there even when we can't see them." "Like love," she teased. "Exactly," he smiled. "You just have to wait for the clouds to clear." They sat together in silence. The air smelled faintly of warm cedar. Somewhere nearby, crickets sang. Essence rested her head on his shoulder, looking out at the house that was no longer his or hers but theirs. "Do you ever think," she whispered, "that if I hadn't called back that night, if Kyle hadn't gotten sick, maybe we'd never have seen each other again?" Charles took her hand. "Some storms don't destroy us, they bring us home." She said nothing, tears slipping down her cheeks, soft, relieved tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For coming back. Not just to stay for a while, but to stay for good." Charles tightened his hold on her hand. "Essence Monroe Webb," he murmured. "If every day starts with your laugh and ends with our son's good night, then I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Inside, Kyle stirred in his sleep, smiling under the faint glow of his nightlight. On the porch, his parents sat quietly. No more words needed. Everything had already been said. Above them, stars bloomed one by one, their reflections glimmering on the little wooden sign outside. The Monroe Webb home. A place where a man learned that love is a responsibility, where a woman discovered that forgiveness is strength, and where a boy realized that family doesn't have to be perfect only together. Essence turned to Charles, smiling through the golden light. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" He nodded, eyes still on the sky. "Yeah. And I think this is just the beginning. When we're young, love is a promise. When we grow up, love becomes a choice to stay, forgive, and believe again." Essence, Charles, and Kyle had walked through misunderstanding, loss, and heartbreak, only to find the most straightforward truth of all: a home and peace within the heart. If this story touched you, leave a T-ray, share the video, and subscribe for more journeys of love and second chances. Because sometimes, the most beautiful thing in life isn't meeting at the right time, but finding your way back to the right person, no matter how long it takes.